It didn't start in a dimly lit casino or a seedy backroom. It started on my couch, with my wife beside me, a football game on the TV, and the harmless glow of my phone in my hand. My life, up until that point, was a picture of comfortable suburban predictability. I was a freelance graphic designer, good enough to keep a steady stream of clients. We had a small, neat house with a garden I was perpetually promising to fix up. We had a daughter whose laughter was the single most valuable asset in my world. Our life wasn't about extravagant wealth. It was built on a foundation of a carefully managed budget, a small but growing savings account, and the shared dream of one day buying a slightly bigger house. It was a good life, a life I now realize I didn't appreciate nearly enough. The betting app I downloaded was just a novelty at first. It was advertised constantly during the games, presented not as gambling but as a game of skill for the true fan. It was about using your knowledge, outsmarting the odds. It felt like a sophisticated fantasy league. I deposited $20 just for fun. I placed a few small, calculated bets on games I was watching anyway, and I won. It was only about $50, but the feeling was disproportionately powerful. It wasn't the money, it was the validation. It felt like my hours of watching sports, of reading articles and analyzing plays had finally paid off in a tangible way. I showed my wife the winnings in the app's digital wallet. "See, all that time on the couch is a legitimate investment," I joked. She smiled, shaking her head at my silly hobby. We used the $50 to order a fancy pizza that weekend. It felt like free money, a victimless pleasure. That first win was the bait, and I swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. The hobby grew. I started depositing a little more, $100 here, $200 there. I was still winning more than I was losing, or so I told myself. I started thinking of it less as a game and more as a side hustle, a smart way to generate some passive income. I created a separate PayPal account for it, telling myself it was to keep the finances clean and organized, to track my profits more easily. But I knew deep down the real reason was to keep it separate from the household accounts, to keep it from my wife's view. It was the first secret, the first time I felt the cold thrill of a hidden life. I was no longer just a husband and father. I was also a shrewd online investor, playing a market that my wife didn't need to be bothered with. The first big loss should have been a wake-up call. It was $1,000 on a game that was supposed to be a lock, a sure thing. The favored team collapsed in the final quarter. As I watched the last seconds tick off the clock, the feeling was a physical sickness, a cold pit in my stomach. It wasn't just the loss of the money, which was a significant amount for us. It was the crushing blow to my ego. My analysis was wrong. I wasn't a genius. I was just another guy who had guessed wrong. The immediate, overwhelming impulse was not to stop. It was to fix it. I had to win that $1,000 back before it was officially lost, before it had to be accounted for in our monthly budget. That night after my wife was asleep, I did something I had never done before. I transferred $1,000 from our joint savings account to my PayPal, and from there into the betting app. It was just a loan, I rationalized, a temporary transfer. I would win it back with a few smart, safe bets and transfer the money back. No one would ever know. The boundary had been crossed. The line between my money and our money was gone. I spent the next few days in a frantic, anxious haze, placing bets not for the fun of it, but with a desperate, grinding need to break even. The wins brought not joy, but a fleeting sense of relief. The losses brought a surge of panic. It was no longer a game. It was a problem that I was frantically trying to solve in secret, and the screen of my phone had become the portal to a world of anxiety and deception that was slowly, but surely, beginning to consume my own. My life split into two distinct, parallel realities. There was the sunlit world where I was a husband and a father, where I designed logos for clients, went to the park with my daughter, and discussed grocery lists with my wife. Then there was the shadow world, the one that existed entirely on the screen of my phone. This world was a frantic 24/7 obsession, a relentless cycle of research, betting, winning, and with increasing frequency, losing. My work, once a source of creative pride, became a chore. I rushed through client projects, my mind half occupied with point spreads and injury reports. My creativity was being siphoned away, poured into the endless task of trying to predict the unpredictable. My daughter would come to show me a drawing, and I'd look up from my phone with a distracted smile, my eyes seeing her, but my brain processing the odds of a second-half comeback in a basketball game in a different time zone. I was becoming a ghost in my own home, a physical presence whose emotional and intellectual energy was being consumed elsewhere. My wife knew something was wrong. She is a kind, intuitive woman, and she could feel me slipping away. My moods became erratic, a direct reflection of my betting outcomes. A winning streak would make me cheerful and generous, quick to suggest a weekend trip or buy a new gadget. A losing streak would turn me into a sullen, irritable recluse. I would snap at her for the smallest things, then retreat into a stony silence she couldn't penetrate. "Is everything okay at work?" she would ask, her brow furrowed with genuine concern. "You just seem so stressed." The lies came easily. "It's just a difficult client. I'm on a tight deadline. I'm not sleeping well." Each lie was a brick in the wall I was building between us, a wall I was decorating with feigned normalcy. The financial deception became more elaborate. I took over managing our finances completely, convincing her it would take some stress off her plate. In reality, it gave me total control to hide my tracks. I was moving money around constantly, a frantic shell game designed to conceal the growing hole in our savings. I would pay one credit card with another, take out cash advances, anything to keep the digital numbers in the betting app from hitting zero. Our dream of buying a bigger house, the one we used to talk about with such excitement, became a topic I actively avoided. When she brought it up, I would talk about the uncertain market and the need for financial prudence, all while I was setting fire to our down payment, one reckless bet at a time. The gaslighting was the cruelest part. I was making her feel like the problem. Her valid concerns about my mood and our finances were dismissed as her being too anxious or overthinking things. I was twisting reality, making her doubt her own intuition, all to protect the addiction that was devouring our life from the inside out. I felt a profound sense of loneliness, the unique isolation of a man living a secret life. I couldn't share my wins with anyone, and I certainly couldn't share the crushing weight of my losses. The shadow world was a one-man prison, and I was both the inmate and the warden. I remember one evening vividly. My wife had planned a special dinner. She had cooked my favorite meal, put on music, and opened a bottle of wine. She wanted to reconnect, to find the man she had married. And I tried. I really did. But my phone was vibrating in my pocket with score alerts from a game I had a huge amount of money on. I kept making excuses to go to the bathroom to check the score. I was there at the table, but my soul was tethered to that game. She eventually just gave up. The light in her eyes faded, and we ate the rest of the meal in a strained silence. She saw a distracted, distant husband. She didn't see the frantic, terrified addict underneath, a man who was losing not just the bet, but the love of his life, and was too powerless to stop it. The worst decision of my life wasn't downloading the app or placing that first bet. It was the thousandth small decision after that. It was every lie I told, every secret I kept, every moment I chose the phantom thrill of the game over the real, tangible love of my family. The downward spiral accelerated with terrifying speed. The hole was too deep to fill with small wins or my freelance income. I was in a constant state of panic, the need for a big score becoming an all-consuming obsession. This wasn't about getting rich anymore. It was about survival, about trying to outrun the consequences that were closing in on me. I started to miss deadlines with clients. My work, once meticulous, became sloppy and rushed. I lost a major client, one that had been my bread and butter for years. The loss of that income should have been a cataclysmic wake-up call, but in the twisted logic of my addiction, it was just another reason to bet bigger. I saw gambling not as the cause of my financial problems, but as the only possible solution. My desperation led me to the darkest corners of the internet. I took out a payday loan online, clicking agree to an astronomical interest rate without a second thought. The money was in my account within an hour, and it was gone by the next day, lost on a series of impulsive, poorly researched bets. I was no longer a strategist. I was a man pulling the lever on a slot machine, praying for a miracle. The lies to my wife became more desperate and fantastical. A large withdrawal from our account was explained away as an emergency tax payment I had forgotten about. The maxed-out credit card was due to a clerical error from the bank that I was sorting out. I was living in a constant state of improvisation, a frantic dance to stay one step ahead of the truth. But the truth has a way of catching up. It came in the form of a phone call. It was our landlord. The rent check had bounced. I had forgotten to move the money. I had miscalculated. I had been so focused on a last-ditch bet that was supposed to solve everything that I had neglected the most basic of our financial obligations. My wife was the one who answered the phone. I was in the other room and heard her side of the conversation. Her voice was initially confused, then apologetic, then a long, listening silence. I walked into the room just as she was hanging up. She looked at me, her face pale, her eyes filled not with anger, but with a terrifying, hollow clarity. "The rent," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It bounced. He said this isn't the first time." In that moment, the entire fragile structure of my deception shattered. There were no more lies to tell. There was nowhere left to run. I broke down, not in a noble, apologetic way, but in a pathetic, gut-wrenching sob. The truth spilled out of me, a toxic confession that had been poisoning me for years. I told her everything. The app, the secret accounts, the savings account, the payday loan, the lost client, the bounced checks. I laid out the full, ugly map of our financial ruin. She sat and listened, her expression unreadable. She didn't interrupt. She just let me empty myself of all the poison. When I was finished, exhausted and empty, she didn't scream or cry. She just looked at me with a profound, soul-weary sadness. "I knew something was wrong," she said, her voice flat. "I just never imagined this." The days that followed were a quiet, orderly dismantling of our life. She was methodical, practical. Her love for me had been eclipsed by her fierce, maternal need to protect our daughter. She called her parents. She started packing. She moved with the grim efficiency of a medic on a battlefield, triaging the situation and saving who she could. And I was not one of the survivors. I was the catastrophe itself. I didn't beg her to stay. What could I say? What promise could I make that wasn't already a proven lie? I had forfeited my right to be her husband, her partner, her trusted friend. The hardest part was trying to explain it to our daughter. We sat her down together, a final act as a united parental front. We told her that Mommy and she were going to live at Grandma's house for a while. She looked from my face to her mother's, her small brow furrowed. "Are you coming too, Daddy?" she asked. The simple, innocent question broke me in a way that all the financial loss never could. I shook my head, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. I watched them drive away, my daughter's small hand pressed against the back window. The silence they left behind was not peaceful. It was the sound of absolute failure. I was alone in a house we could no longer afford, surrounded by the memories of a life I had gambled away. The worst decision of my life was not a single bet. It was the cumulative weight of 1,000 secret choices that had led me to this moment of total, deserved isolation. The eviction notice was almost a formality. I was already a ghost haunting a house that was no longer mine. I packed what little I had into a few cardboard boxes and moved into a single room in a shared house on the other side of town. The place was as bleak as my state of mind. My world had shrunk from a comfortable family home to these four walls, and the future had shrunk from a landscape of dreams to the simple, brutal challenge of surviving the next 24 hours. For a while, I was numb. I found a menial job in a warehouse, doing inventory on the night shift. The work was repetitive and required no thought, which was a mercy. It allowed me to turn off my brain, a brain that had become my own worst enemy. I would work, sleep, and stare at the ceiling, replaying every mistake, every lie, every lost bet. The shame was a physical weight, a constant pressure on my chest that made it hard to breathe. The urge to bet was still there, a siren song promising a quick fix, a way to escape the grim reality I had created. But I had nothing left to bet with. I had no money, no credit, no assets. Hitting absolute rock bottom was, in a strange way, a form of protection. I had finally run out of road. The change began with a small, simple decision. I was walking home from my shift one morning, exhausted and hopeless, and I saw a flyer for a debt counseling service taped to a lamppost. I almost kept walking, but some small, surviving flicker of the man I used to be, the man who made plans and solved problems, made me stop. I took the number. Making that call was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It meant admitting to a complete stranger the full extent of my failure. The woman on the other end of the line was kind and non-judgmental. She didn't talk to me about wins or losses. She talked to me about budgets, payment plans, and something she called financial recovery. For the first time in years, I felt a tiny, fragile sliver of hope. She also gave me the number for a gambling addiction support group. I went to a meeting that week, my stomach in knots. I sat in a circle of strangers and listened. Their stories were my story. The same lies, the same secrets, the same devastation. When I finally spoke, the words came out shaky and uncertain, but for the first time they were completely honest. Speaking the truth in that room and being met with nods of understanding was like lancing a wound. The poison started to drain out. My life became a regimen of recovery, I worked my shift. I went to my meetings. I followed the strict, unforgiving budget my debt counselor helped me create. Every paycheck was divided up. A portion for my rent, a portion for my food, and the largest portion sent to a trust account to begin repaying the debts I owed, and the child support I was legally and morally obligated to pay. There was no thrill, no adrenaline. My life was about discipline, responsibility, and the slow, unglamorous work of cleaning up my own mess. After 6 months of this, I wrote a letter to my ex-wife. I didn't make excuses or ask for another chance. I simply apologized for the pain and chaos I had caused. I told her I was in recovery and that I was taking responsibility for my actions. I ended by saying that I hoped one day I could be a father that our daughter could rely on. I didn't expect a reply. But a few weeks later, she called. She agreed to let me see our daughter for a few hours in a park, halfway between her new life and my old one. Seeing my little girl run towards me that day is a memory I will hold on to for the rest of my life. I wasn't a hero or a big shot. I was just her dad with nothing to offer but my time and my full, undivided attention. My phone stayed in my pocket. My focus was entirely on her. It was the richest I had felt in years. My life now is built on a foundation of honesty and simplicity. I still work a simple job. I live in a small, clean apartment. I will be in debt for a long, long time. But I am sober. I am present. I am rebuilding one honest day at a time. The worst decision of my life led me through hell, but it also forced me to find a better way to live. I lost everything I thought I wanted only to discover what I truly needed: integrity, responsibility, and the simple, priceless joy of pushing my daughter on a swing in the park. Thanks listening this story. Now I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let's see how global our community is. Comment your country down below. Share this story to your friends and leave a like and subscribe for more episodes like this.